All right, great, thank you. Who here is just waiting for Dave Kennedy's talk? All right, yeah, here you go. An honest man. So I'm one of the rookie presenters that Rocky mentioned. At the end of today, my laptop, which you may recognize from Tom's North Korea talk, will have done twice as many presentations as I have. So it's more famous than I am. This presentation came out of two factors. It was the extended deadline and a few too many gin and tonics on a Friday night. So, drunk me had to decide what I was good enough at to do a presentation on, and drunk me decided that I was good at bullshitting people. The great thing about it is either that is objectively true, or I'm bullshitting you now. So either way, drunk me is a genius. So I decided that my entree into this would be, I talk a little bit about social engineering from perspective of some of my personal favorite sources of ideas for face-to-face social engineering, and that's con artists and magicians. Usual disclaimers, everybody knows this. My thoughts are my own. Don't try this at home. You could get arrested, the usual stuff. This is about me. I know nobody cares. There's my Twitter handle. If you're interested in what I've got to say, go ahead and hit me up there, DM me, whatever. I have a background in anthropology, so I kind of like how people's heads work, how culture works. There's my premise. Social engineers should be studying con artists and conjurers. The basic reason is that those disciplines all rely on deception, and in some cases they're using techniques that have been around for hundreds of years. I mean, magicians have been deceiving people who know they're being deceived with some of the same techniques they've been using since the 18th century. So these techniques work, and they rely on flaws in human perception that are hard to counter. One of my favorite pieces of advice from a con artist is from a guy named J.R. Weil. He was known as the Yellow Kid. He operated in the Midwest in the 20s and 30s. He actually lived to be 100. And when he died in 1976, he didn't seem to be hurting for money then. But he said one of the most useful things for a con artist was to be well and widely read. And the reason for that, what this actually means is you got to learn a little bit about a lot of shit, right? There's two reasons for this. One is it opens up opportunities, right? Con artists are always looking for opportunities. So knowing what's new, what's a fad, what's going on, that's always helpful when you're trying to convince people to give you their money. If I was a con artist right now, I'd be working on my Brexit strategy. How am I going to use that to con people out of their money? The other reason, which is a little bit more important for face-to-face social engineering, is that you've got to be able to make small talk, right? Your con artists are constantly trying to meet new people, talk to them, get them to trust them, and to do that, small talk is a great tool, right? So, how do you start learning a little bit about a lot of shit? Well, first of all, you got to know your weaknesses, right? Okay, so who here, the little audience participation, who here remembers who was in the Super Bowl this year in January? There's one guy. Don't be ashamed. This is relevant cultural knowledge, right? All right? Okay, so a few people do. How many of you know the recipe for a gin martini? 6 parts gin, 1 part vermouth, right? Roughly. All right, so some people have different strengths and weaknesses. All right, my weakness is indeed sports. I'm terrible at remembering anything about sports. I'll remember who won the Super Bowl for a week. But that's relevant cultural knowledge. So when I'm going to a new area, I have to spend about 15 minutes looking up information about the local sports teams, right? What are the pro teams? What are the college teams? What's in season? Are they on any streaks? What are the team colors? What are their mascots? Why? Because when you go into offices, people constantly have little mascots. They have banners. They have all kinds of stuff about sports. It's a great way to make small talk. It's a great way to distract people, right? Somebody's trying to vet you. Some gatekeeper is trying to vet you, and they've got a little mascot sitting on their desk, and you can point to it and go, oh, hey, you must be a Syracuse fan, right? The Orangemen are doing pretty well this week. And once you learn this stuff, sometimes you remember it. I got to stay away from over there. Once you learn this stuff, you never forget it, right? Anybody who's from New York knows that Syracuse's mascot is a little guy named Otto the Orange. He looks like Mr. Met with jaundice. He's like a little guy with an orange head. So that's one piece of sports trivia I do remember. Okay, con artists also will talk a lot about how they set up cons. And this is my absolute favorite part of trying to do social engineering scenarios, is setting up the backstory. So this guy is the yellow kid. This is J.R. Weil. And I'm just going to talk about one of his setups. I've got a link to his biography at the end. It's an awesome read. He did all kinds of crazy stuff. But in setting up a con, so one of his big cons was he would sell bogus mining stocks or worthless mining stocks. So it helped for people to think he knew something about mining. In 1914, McClure's magazine ran a series of articles about people who made $100,000 a year. The guy on the right there is a mining engineer named Pope Yateman. He made $100,000 a year by turning a worthless Chilean copper mine into a moneymaker for his employer. The yellow kid bought every copy of McClure's magazine he could get his hands on. He took it to a printer friend of his who liked to do shady printing work, and he reprinted this frontispiece. Instead of Pope Yateman's picture, he had his picture printed. He then had Confederates go to all the small towns where he was going to run his mining scheme. They'd go to the library, they'd ask for the McClure's book that had the bound copies of McClure's magazine, and they would replace the April issue with his modified issue. And then through subtlety, he'd never tell people directly this. He'd have Confederates insinuate that, hey, there's an article about this guy you've been doing business with. You should go check it out. Well, do you have a copy? No, but, your library probably has a copy. Go to the library. So, he's making them do some legwork. He's making them go find the information. So it almost feels like, they discovered this all themselves. They did their research. And, there's this guy. There's this picture in the magazine. He's a famous mining engineer. And, I should do business with him. I should give him my money. What's great about this is this was hard to do back then. He had to have a printer do all this work. Nowadays, this is all easy. You can print out business cards, fake invoices, all that stuff at home. This is my favorite part of setting up any kind of scenario. I've got, binders full of fake business cards and fake work orders, and this is just fascinating stuff. It's just fun to sit there and counterfeit legally, right? So my point about that was all of his long con setups were very subtle. They were careful, they were thorough, and they were plausible. A lot of it was arm's length suggestion that people should check something out, and covering a lot of the bases, things that people were going to ask questions about. Most cons always have or pretty much every con has some kind of profit motive. We'll sometimes call it need and greed. It's not always money. Sometimes it's people need something or they think they're going to get something get something on the cheap. But in general, cons make some kind of value proposition. So how does this apply to social engineering where you're not directly sometimes giving people money? Well, think about it more in terms of value, right? So although there's monetary value, there's also time. People's time is important, and if you're wasting their time, them disposing of the time waster is a value proposition. There's also this concept of negative reinforcement, right, with operant conditioning. If you're creating an uncomfortable situation because you're holding up the line, especially with gatekeepers, they got a lot of stuff on their plate, especially, we'll talk about timing later, but especially if there's already other people waiting to be processed and you're creating a bottleneck, you're a pain in their ass, that's a negative stimulus which can be removed one of two ways. They can deny you entry, which is more uncomfortable because they're going to have to tell you no, or, they can sort of scoop you along and get you going and the pain goes away. The other interesting profit motive can be this, or kind of reverse profit motive, is kind of the sense of obligation. So there's an article a lot of you probably read recently about some researchers in Luxembourg. They went out, they asked people security questions, right? One of the questions was, what's your password? They gave everybody chocolate. Some of the people, they gave them chocolate after they answered all the questions. Some of them, they gave them chocolate before they answered the questions. The people that got the chocolate first were 10% roughly more likely to give them their password. Give them a password. Actually, it's irrelevant whether they gave them their real password or lied. They did something extra because they had been given a gift ahead of time. And, a piece of chocolate's pretty cheap, right? But trying to create that sense of obligation, people want to reciprocate. Human society is based on reciprocity, right? People give gifts, they give assistance, and it's reciprocated. So if you can create that sense of obligation in a gatekeeper, you're improving your odds of access. And this was one of the things I wanted to say very early on, which of course I forgot. is none of these are home runs, right? None of this is a sure thing. These are all things designed to improve your odds, which again is a lesson from con men. None of the cons are 100%. You're always working the odds, right? Very few con artists who even do things like card cons or dice cons, very few of them use heavy dice, like heavy loaded dice, where they come up with the number that they want every time. Why? Because it's super suspicious, right? They're more interested in working a long con, working on the numbers. So you're always working to improve your odds. There's a couple concepts in most cons. The concept of the inside man, and I put it in quotes because clearly it could be a woman as well. It's just saying inside person doesn't sound like you're a 1920s gangster. It doesn't sound like you're a con man, right? So you got your inside man. That's the person who's actively working your con, right? Most cons, and this is sort of a misconception. People think con artists are like they're working alone, they're on their own. Most cons, especially long cons, big money cons, they always have confederates. There's always other people involved, multiple people. So sometimes you'll have the inside man who's kind of actively running the con. You've got your outside man who's confederate of the con, who plays an outsider. Frequently, that person will either be someone that's getting sucked into the same con. You know, they'll put money in, the victim's putting money in. It's like, well, this guy's putting money in, I'll put some money in. The point is that you're going to have confederates. You can use them to assist your entry. So here's an example. You're going to send your first operator in. We always travel in pairs, right? Anyway, so you're going to send your first operator in, and they're going to sort of cause a pain point, right? They're coming in, and maybe they're coming in like they're a cold calling salesman, something kind of annoying that your gatekeeper's going to have to deal with. And your second person enters kind of just right around the same time, but not obviously with them. And, your first man's going to create this pain point. They're going to start, I need to get in. I need to see I need to see somebody. I don't remember who I was here to see last week, right? Probably the gatekeeper's not going to just let him up. They're going to start asking him questions. Who do you need to see? What are you doing? Well, I don't remember his name. I was talking to a guy. He said, yeah, come on, stop by. Well, I can't let you in. Okay. All right. Starts to walk away. Well, wait a minute. I think his name was Mike. I think it was Mike. You got a mic upstairs? He was a kind of a tall guy. I think he had glasses. He's wasting somebody's time, right? Now, the whole time, your second guy is standing behind him. Yeah, trying to make eye contact with your gatekeeper, the whole point is to get the gatekeeper and your second man to sort of form this alliance. It's like, God, this guy's an ass. Would he just go away, right? Your second guy's like, give him an eye roll occasionally. Anyway, once you finally get rid of the first guy, your second guy has a real simple request, one that's practically routine, right? Oh, yeah, I just need to get upstairs. Just need to get a card, go upstairs, fix the vending machine. I need a card to go upstairs, empty the shred bin, whatever your scenario is. And, you've done a couple things here. One is the first guy was, sort of the mic drop moment where you're like, I'm going to deny him entry. Boom, I'm done. I did my job. Right? You feel good. The gatekeeper feels good about denying someone entry. You get to the second guy, and he's got a real routine request. And it's like, oh, yeah, go ahead. No problem. We do that all the time. I actually had this happen where the second guy got an apology from the gatekeeper. They're like, man, I'm sorry about that guy. What a waste of time. Another thing con artists use a lot is this Good Samaritan. You're just a good guy, right? People are much more likely to trust someone who behaves in a trustworthy fashion. Well, you can engineer a trustworthy behavior, right? There's a lot of cons that involve finding lost items. Well, use something similar to your advantage, right? You walk in, you're talking to a gatekeeper. Before you even start your spiel, you're like, hey, I found this earring in the parking lot. It looks really expensive. I'd hate somebody to have to lose that. Can I leave this with you, right? This is, here you go, take that, cool. All right, you start your scenario, right? So what have you done? You're a good guy. You just gave somebody, they don't know how much it's worth, right? They're going to take your word for it. Well, you found it. Maybe you know something about jewelry. Maybe it's worth something. In the short time that you're there, nobody's going to Nobody's going to check, right? You can buy costume jewelry from Goodwill for like, $1 a pound. It's great. The other one is to have a backup when you're tailgating, right? Nobody likes getting the door slammed in their face. So if it looks like it's going to happen, because you get people who are like real suspicious when you're behind them. If it looks like they're going to cut you off, stop them. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Did you drop this $5 Starbucks gift card? It looked like it fell out of your pocket, man. I don't drink coffee. You might as well take it, even if it's not yours. Go ahead. Maybe they'll hold the door for you then. We talked a little bit about timing. Timing is everything, especially with short cons. Quick change artists, short change artists. They're always going to, when do they show up? Anybody who's worked retail knows that these guys show up during peak periods because the, retail workers like just trying to pump through the line of people that are there. That's the time they're going to come in and try to get, give you $10 and get $20 back. Same thing for, physical pen testing, social engineering. When's the target busiest? When are they most likely to want to reduce the number of steps they have to go through to get you processed? Shift changes are a great time. End of business, right? Everybody just wants to go home. They want to go home. If you're showing up at the end of the day, either, you got a long job in front of you because you're going to be working in the evening, or, you're there at the last minute. So again, creating a sense of there's some rush. You got to get something done. Lots of cons use authority, and I know from the physical pen testing side, people do this all the time. There's lots of really, really nasty cons that use authority, especially in some foreign countries. You'll get the fake police, the fake immigration police. By the way, don't do that because, impersonating a cop in this country is usually illegal. But people do respond to authority, and depending on the organizational culture, they may respond much better. I think it was Kevin Mitnick that was like, oh, military, yeah, it's easy to get socially engineer them, right? They all respond to authority. You just tell them you outrank them. But it's similar. Some gatekeepers are conditioned to respond to people in a suit and tie because that's what usually it's what they fear because, their boss is a tyrant. So, they're looking to appease a person in a suit and tie. I was actually in a location where I had tailgated in, and when they found me, they spent the next 20 minutes trying to find another office for me because, I was a visiting executive. They're like, well, we need this room for something, but we'll find you another place. We'll reach a better place, right? And again, it depends on your assessment of the target. So, this is the summary of con artist tips and tricks. Know a little bit about a lot of stuff. You're exploiting human nature. Read people for clues, and this includes everything from what they're wearing to the mascot on their desk. What are they interested in? If you can generate a sense of obligation, all the better. Offer some kind of profit to the venture, even if that profit is negative reinforcement. You're removing the stimulus they don't want. I'll talk a little bit about stage magic techniques. So this manual is available online for free. It's a combination of some books that were written by the CIA by a stage magician named John Mulholland in the 50s. It's one of the last remnants of MK Ultra. It's one of the few pieces that wasn't destroyed in the 70s when they got rid of everything else. And their reason for writing this are an interesting story all in and of themselves. It had to do with the CIA's interest in putting hallucinogens or drugs in people's drinks and stuff like that. But anyway, it has some excellent advice related to conjuring, and it's all some fairly simple techniques. One thing it talks about is this concept of stage management, right? A misconception about magic is that close magic is the hard stuff to do, right? People are really impressed by up-close magic. Up-close magic is where most magicians start. The reason is, if I'm close to somebody, I can control the angles. I can control most of what they see. If I'm on stage, I'm very exposed. Everybody can see what I'm doing, and I have to worry a lot about, creating cover for what I'm going to do. So stage management, just refers to if you're trying to do some kind of work, if you're trying to steal something or hide something, you're going to have to control viewing angles. You're going to have to generate cover. You're going to have to position yourself or your audience to give you that kind of cover. I already talked about close work. And the last one, which pen testers all know, big actions cover small actions. This works in pen testing, it works in magic, right? If you're going to do something subtle, make a lot of noise. So you slam them with a mass scan while you're doing something else. Same thing with actual close work. If you're trying to deceive somebody or misdirect them, it's like you see magicians do the flourishes all the time. That you're trying to get people to look at the shiny, not at what's not where I'm pocketing something. So the last topic I want to do, and I actually sort of used it a little bit before, but it's cold reading, right? So this one sort of straddles the line between cons and conjurers because both sets use it quite a bit. How many people in the room are named Michael? I sense that there's somebody in the room named Michael. There's a Michael, there's a Michael, there's a Michael. I'm going to pick you. Do you have a large family? No, you don't. Maybe I'm thinking of a different Michael. Does Michael have a large family? Do you have a sister, a female relative named Jennifer, Jen, Gina, something that starts with a J? Jill, Jackie? Nothing? I'm not getting a read from you. What about you, sir? Your name? Do you have a relative named starts with a J? Is it Jen, Jennifer, Jenny, something like that? Jacqueline, Jill, something like that? Very close to you? Okay, so this is what if you don't know who this is the world's largest douchebag. This is John Edward. He purports to be a psychic, and most of what he does is either cold reading or hot reading. Either he's doing what I just did, which is fishing the audience based on the odds, or sometimes using his confederates to investigate the people that he's talking to. So anyway, those are two techniques of cold reading. What I just did is just shotgunning. I'm looking for somebody named Michael out in the audience, and I'm going to kind of fish because the spirit world is so powerful, but they're so fucking unclear about what they want, right? They clearly they can find John Edward wherever he is on the planet, but they can't tell him who's he's looking for, right? It starts with a J sound. So that's shotgunning. Fishing is sort of using clues, which we talked about earlier. You're looking at how people are dressed, what they're wearing, depending on cultural context. Things they're wearing may be specific to whether they're married, whether they're single, whether they're in mourning. All those things are cold reading techniques, and they can help you again when you're facing a gatekeeper because you're fishing. Like I said earlier when I was doing my salesman spiel, I think his name was Mike. All right, why did I choose Mike? Well, Social Security Administration, I'm sorry if you can't see that. You can go to their website. You can look by state, by year, and it will give you the top 100 names for the state and the year. This is for Ohio in 1968 and 1978, which seemed like a pretty good guess for the age distribution that this room would be. And the number one hit for male names is Michael. The number two hit varied. It was either Jason or David. So Michael seemed pretty safe. I'd have some of those in the room. Women's names are much harder, which is why I started with the man and then tried to figure out the woman's name. But you see, Jennifer was okay, and there's lots of other names that start with J, so, I had a pretty good chance of finding someone. And, clearly, if you've got an audience full of people who want to believe this stuff, you're off to the races. All right, how do organizations counteract all these techniques? Well, it's not rocket science, right? And I'm going to murder this, but this is Ronald Reagan's favorite phrase, right? Trust but verify. It's actually a Russian proverb. Doveryai no proveryai. If it's fine to trust people, but in the context of your organization, verify them. More importantly, though, make sure the gatekeepers are actually empowered to enforce policy. It's very frustrating if you have policies that say you do X and Y to vet visitors, but the gatekeepers can't really enforce that. And the biggest reason for that is management temperament, right? If you show me a gatekeeper who once in their career has had an executive chew them out because they denied a VIP entry, I'll show you a gatekeeper that's going to be socially engineered or can be socially engineered because they've been conditioned to say, well, it's a lot more painful to get chewed out by that asshole than to just let people in. They haven't filled out all the proper paperwork, but it's a VIP, so I'm letting them through. Make sure they're trained to enforce policy. How many people here have a visitor policy that says you need to look at government-issued ID? That few. That's interesting. So, of the people that have that policy, how many of them are actually how many actually train their gatekeepers to recognize the security features on government-issued ID, or issue them black lights so that they can actually check whether the holograms and security features are legit? If you have a policy, make sure people can enforce it. And like I said, management temperament is key to this process. The management has to accept the fact that it's much more important that you follow the process than that they not be inconvenienced. So there's resources. I'll figure out some way of getting this presentation up because there's a bunch of stuff here. There's some psychology stuff which is interesting. Some of the stuff about the stylistic behavior and information exchange is interesting, and there's some stuff there about risk perception and affect heuristic. That's all the all the sort of hard science on behavior. But oops, and that's me again. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, actually, I already gave one away. Cool.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So in a couple of minutes, we're going to have our final keynote, a couple of housekeeping notes. After this talk, the after party is going to be downstairs. So, and we'll do like a little thank you, ending, closing statement, and all that stuff. We got a couple of prizes, etc. But just kind of to plant some seeds, we're going to ask everybody to maybe take a couple of chairs and fold them, and we're going to have a little bit of a system to pile them up because they're going to have some bands in here tonight. So we want to make sure you know something.
You got a belt on. You got a belt on.
I know. I do have a belt on. Again, Dave is setting up, and so if everybody can assist us in taking some chairs once this is done, and then we're going to migrate downstairs. We've got some dinner for everybody, and that's pretty much about it. How are we doing here? Do you want a shot there, buddy? Yeah. All right. Hold on. I'll grab that. We'll be back.
Thanks. This Belving is good. Yeah, that's perfect.
Chris brought that.
Yeah, that's good.
Watch that.
Okay.